My name is Justin Staub, and I'm your DECA GOAT. Today, we're going to talk about role plays. Role plays are such an integral part of your competition. If you are in an individual series event or a team decision making event, it makes up half to two-thirds of your overall score. And it's something that's very difficult to prepare for because you can't just study for your role play, it takes a lot of practice. So, in this video today, we're going to take and break down some general advice, the general structure of a role play and how to prepare, and then look at a role play roadmap. So, let's get started. The first part of this video is just general role play advice. All the general advice will be linked down below in a handout you can use with your chapter. So let's go through this pretty quickly. Number one, dress professionally. You want to look as sharp as you can and still be comfortable. Boys, some things that I've seen a lot of is make sure you wear a belt with dress pants. Make sure you don't wear sneakers or boat shoes. Boys and girls, make sure that if you're going to wear jewelry, it's not distracting jewelry. Uh, Ladies, if you're going to wear stockings or hosiery, make sure it doesn't have runs in it. Make sure your nail polish isn't chipped. I've had students lose points for chipped nail polish from judges before. And make sure that if you're going to have makeup, your makeup's on point. You don't have to do any of those things, but if you're going to go to that extra level and make yourself look super presentable, make sure you pay attention to all those details. Tip number two, use formal language. Try to avoid all the ums and ers. Now, it's tough to do in a live role play, and sometimes you just need to think. So give yourself the grace of having just a second of silence so you can think about your next thought. Number two with that is you also want to try to include industry jargon or industry language in your role play. Try to bring in some outside expertise. It helps to have some flashcards of buzzwords that you want to try to work in, and you practice those flashcards of buzzwords before you even get to that role play. Number three is all about soft skills. Smile. Start your role play with a smile. Handshake. If you're allowed to shake hands, shake hands. And general posture. Make sure you're sitting on the front third of your chair. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor, and you're sitting there with this confidence and this energy. Remember that your judge gets to see you for just 10 minutes, and a lot of these soft skills, a lot of this looking your judge in the eye and being confident will just pay off big dividends. Brings me to tip number four, confidence. Sell it. If you go in and you've practiced and you've practiced and you've practiced, you've got 10 minutes to really be confident. Uh, some of my students like to say, fake it till you make it, which also isn't a bad tip, a bad strategy if you really just don't know what you're doing, but you want to eliminate as many of those I don't know what I'm doing situations if you can. So go in with that confidence. And that leads me to tip number five, act the role. You only are going to see this judge for 10 minutes in your entire life, probably. So really, really, really get into that role and really sell it. Yes, you're not really a sales professional, or yes, you're not really the human resources director, but in the next 10 minutes you are. So really get into that role and really treat the judge like he or she is in her particular role as well. So really get into that and sell that. Tip number six, props. Props. You have 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper when you do your preparatory work. You can do a lot with that. However, be thoughtful about what you do. Some students make like PowerPoint looking slides and they write them out. In my mind as a judge, that's a cheap way of the student being able to look at the notes and present to you. I don't love that tip. Also, if you're going into a meeting, you have to think about the sort of meeting that you're going into. You don't want to present a PowerPoint presentation to someone who you wouldn't normally present a PowerPoint presentation to. A lot of students like to have, a lot of students in my chapter like to say, make a business card. That's not bad if you're presenting to somebody who needs to follow up with you. A business card is a good way to have that contact. However, if you're presenting to the CEO of your company, they probably already know how to get a hold of you. So don't make a business card for a scenario that doesn't warrant one. If you're asked to design something, maybe sketch out a design logo. All that's appropriate. And all these things, guys, can show your creativity. And I've seen judges get wowed by some student creativity in this field. Just make sure it's appropriate. Don't oversell that scenario. Don't hand a business card to someone who doesn't need one. And if you're anything like me, make sure your drawing is good. Mine isn't. I wouldn't do that at all. So you don't need props to really make your role play sell. However, and the props are something that you hand to your judge at the very end of your role play. It's really neat if it's hey, here's a sample social media post, or hey, here's a business card, because the judge then holds on to that, and that's going to remind them of your awesome role play as they go throughout the day. So if it's appropriate, give the judge something to remember you by. If it's not appropriate, please don't force it. Or if you can't pull it off, if you're not an artist or your handwriting's not too neat, don't let that be a down point for your role play. All right, so when you sit down to practice your first handful of role plays when you're brand new, you want to approach the role play note taking in a very consistent, very formulaic process. I've had many students say that they ended up losing their train of thought during the role play and they had to look down at their note sheet and they couldn't figure out where they had written their information. So I like to suggest a very standard approach. If you're using a 8.5 by 11 blank sheet of paper, until you get comfortable with the process, I put together a little note sheet that I'll link in the description down below. Uh, I would suggest you always write this information in the same spot for every single role play so you know where to look when you get lost. In the top left, I would always write your role, who you are in the role play. In the top left, I would also write the judge's role, who they are, and the company or companies that are represented within the role play. And then, and then all role plays have a problem that you are supposed to be presenting about. Write the problem out at the very top so you know specifically that's what you're supposed to be addressing. Your role play will have either 5 or 7 performance indicators. I would write them all down. You can shorthand these if you want, but write them all down and give yourself some space for notes underneath. Uh, when you go through the text of the role play, then you want to pull out some specific details from the role play that will help you answer your performance indicators and will help you enhance how you're going to talk about what those performance indicators mean and how you're going to connect them to your role play. Last but not least, down at the bottom, you want to make sure you have a solution. And when you come back to present the solution at the end, which we'll talk about, you want probably to readdress the problem and state your solution very clearly, summarizing the key points of your performance indicators. And last but not least, a closing. Please plan this out. You don't want to just, at the end of your role play, just say, peace, I'm done, or thanks. Plan out what you want to say next. If you're in a meeting that should have a follow-up meeting, ask for a follow-up meeting. If you are a sales representative, you might want to hand off a business card and contact information. If you were supposed to have a deliverable, like maybe a social media post, you want to have some samples that you can discuss. So think about what your closing is for your role play. It'll be that last bit of lasting impression for your judge. So once again, I would recommend using this sheet if you're a new DECA member and practicing how to get that information out of your or into your role play. And then after a couple of practices, you probably won't need this sheet at all. But this is the very basic information that you need from your role play to be successful in your performance.
All right, so now that we've gone through how to set up your preparation for your role play, let's take a look at an actual role play and put some of these ideas into practice. So nothing on this front page is new. There's information up here that's new, but you don't really need that to prepare for your role play. And all of this stuff is just instruction. So ignore all of that. The first thing that you would want to do on this title page is look at your performance indicators. Your performance indicators, as we just said, are the things that you would run and write down on your prep sheet kind of in the middle and leave yourself room to add some detail. You want to write them down in the exact language here or nearly the exact language because you don't want to confuse your judge. You can also go in order if you want, or you can kind of mix them up, but use as precise language from what's exactly said here in your note taking so that when you get to your role play presentation piece, the judge knows exactly where you're at. On the next page is your event situation. So this tells you all the things that you need to know. Your role is you're a store manager. Your judge's role in this case is that they are the district manager. So you're speaking to somebody higher up in the food chain. It is good to know the company that you're working for is Laney B and that the company that you're acquiring is called Juliet. And the problem, there's a couple of problem statements here, but the problem really is that you're taking on this new company and you have to have a plan to deal with a new clientele. So all those things are what you want to extract very quickly from the role play event situation. Put that into your planning sheet, and now you have to work through figuring out some details from here to add to your performance indicators. They give you a lot of detail to work with, and you want to include as much to all of this that you can into your performance indicators and your discussion for your judge. So once you have all of that planned out, you come up with a solution to your problem statement here, and that you make sure you have a good closing, which we'll talk about in the next section of this video. I want to show you what else is in the role play that you don't get to see, but the judge does. So the judge has the general instructions and has the whole role play as well. But at the end of the role play, you want to make sure, and we'll discuss this in the next section, but you want to make sure that you ask the judge if they have any questions. And there's some tips on how you can do that. But the judge always has 1 or 2 questions that they're supposed to ask to the contestant. So here the judge's questions are specifically. If you download sample role plays, take a look at that. If you answer those questions already part of your as part of your presentation, the judge might not actually need to ask you anything. But you always want to make sure that you give the judge an opportunity to ask you questions in a natural manner. The last thing I want to show you is the rubric. On the rubric, you always have 5 or 7 performance indicators that make up 70% of your score. 30% of your score is made up from these soft skills. That's something that you can present or that you can practice over and over and over again that you can get very good at. Creativity, communication, effective lines of thinking, overall impressions. You should be able to get 5s or 6s based on practice on those 21st century skills. So you should be able to walk out with 30 or 20, 25 of those points pretty easily. What you need to be able to do well is the performance indicators, and that's where your practice, as we'll talk about in the next section, really pays off.
If you're doing an individual series event, you have a 10-minute role play. If you're doing a team event, you have a 15-minute role play, and you can juice some of those times up by 50%. I've outlined in the screen, and you can get all this in the doc that's linked down below, how generally you want to approach your role play. First, there's an introduction, and you want to think about what your introduction is going to be and how you're going to approach your judge. Um, think this one through. Uh, think about if you're going to go see the principal of your high school and you're going to go meet with your principal. You're not just going to walk right in and sit down. If you're going to meet with somebody who's higher up in the hierarchy in your organization, let them invite you to sit down. So think about how you're going to approach your judge and whether your judge is somebody who is above you in the organization or below you in the organization, and let that affect how you introduce yourself. However you do it, smile and be confident. The next thing you want, and introduction, 30 seconds. The next thing you want to do in your plan is to outline your role play. Real quickly, let the judge know what you're going to get into. Boom, boom, boom. Here are my key talking points, and then get into your key talking points. Now, your key talking points are your performance indicators, and you want to be as precise as you can be about your performance indicators and use exact language if you can, or nearly exact language. I've had students differ about whether you need to put the performance indicators in the order in which they're presented in the role play. Uh, First off, if a judge is lazy and not really paying attention, the judge wants to hear them in that order. It makes it easy for the judge to score. However, if you're creative and you've thought about how the performance indicators roll together, you actually might want to swap some of the order. If you do that, you definitely want to outline in advance how you're going to do it and kind of tell the judge that you're going to go a little out of order, but it makes sense. And then try to use the exact wording of your performance indicator to really drive that home. Address all your performance indicators, connect them back to the role play, bring in outside creative solutions or creative examples to some of those connected to the real world. The fourth thing you're going to do, and you've got about 4 minutes for this, you want to summarize all of your key points. And you want to also explain your solution to the role play. All role plays have a problem that you're trying to address. In your summary and solution, you want to make sure that you represent the problem, you state your solution, and then you go back through all the key points of your role play to drive that home. Between the performance indicator and the summary and the solution, that's probably 5 to 7 minutes of your role play if you're planning this out well. And you certainly can adjust the time either way. And but you want to save yourself time at the end for about a minute and a half of a closure. You, if nothing else, you want to thank the judge. Thank the judge for their time. Look them in the eye again, smile, and be confident. However, depending on what your role play is, you also probably want to ask for another meeting. You might want to ask the judges all have 2 questions they're supposed to ask to every individual. Uh, Always thank them for their time at the end and ask if they have any questions, or ask the judge's thoughts about your plan. Ask for some judge feedback. Now, remember to stay in the role. So if you're speaking to your CEO, you might ask your CEO's thoughts on your particular presentation. If you are a sales manager and you're talking to a sales team, you might ask the sales team members their thoughts on how to approach this new strategy. But remember at the end that you want to turn it back over to the judge and allow the judge to ask you questions. And also remember that it would be keen to have a follow-up meeting, have something else that you're going to try to re-engage the client, the judge with. If you follow this order and practice and get your timings down, I am sure that you will ace your role play. So there you have it, 3 parts and a very, very long YouTube video. I hope you got some good tips from the general advice from the role play structure or that roadmap to success. But remember, the most important thing you can do is practice your role plays. You want to try to do 3 before districts, 3 before states, 3 before nationals, as many as you can get in. Once you get very comfortable with the structure, and then you just leave yourself with the intangibles, the unknowns, uh, that'll ease your mind going into those role plays, and you'll build up confidence for your DECA success. My name is Justin Saul, the DECA GOAT. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more content, hit the subscribe button. Best of luck on your DECA success journey.